Hi. This week has been weird. It's been a very difficult week, but it's also been a very, very strange one for me. I'm Quinn and I'm autistic, and this is Autistic. But this isn't your average come on or garden YouTube autism video. These last few days at the ripe old age of 55, I got a window into the world of neurotypical thought and feeling such as I've never had before. And, as you've probably gathered from the title, I didn't like it. This is going to be a simple chat, no graphics or B-roll, just me, a camera and a cup of tea. So get yourself comfortable and I'll tell you what's been going on. The bridge between the autistic world and the neurotypical world is a shaky one. Always has been. Even before there was a formally defined name for us, society found ways of pushing autistic and many other neurodivergent folks to the fringes of society. Autistic people don't look any different to anyone else, but we're seen to behave differently, and for a long time nobody really bothered to look much further than that. Even now, the so-called gold standard of autism intervention is just conversion therapy with a lick of respectability painted over it by clueless politicians looking for an easy fix. It seeks to train autistic kids to act like non-autistic kids, to live a lie, rather than to empower them to navigate the world as an autist. But outside the profit-driven world of pseudoscience and political quackery, real progress has been made in building stronger bridges between the two sides, and many of them have stemmed from an observation made about autistic folks since the very beginning. A lot of the behaviours, thought processes and even fears associated with an autism diagnosis can be found elsewhere within the human experience. Stress can make almost anyone adopt a whole swathe of autistic characteristics and even thought processes for a short time when experiencing trauma. I'm not talking any old stress though. People don't start acting autistic because of FOMO or a row on the internet. They do it when they're really up against it. In hostage situations, under interrogation, or when faced with insurmountable, life-changing personal trauma. When someone who isn't autistic can't make eye contact, loses connection with their feelings, or suddenly can't speak anymore, you know there's something very wrong. None of that is news though. Anyone who's spent any amount of time researching autism knows that autistic behaviours and trauma behaviours have a huge overlap, and that trauma is characteristic of most autistic childhoods. You have to be traumatised to get an autism diagnosis, remember? It's in the diagnostic criteria that our traits must make our lives difficult, or we're not autistic. How many of you know that it goes both ways though? That in rare cases, trauma can make autistic people feel things that we don't normally feel. It's rare that we're given a glimpse into the world of neurotypical thoughts and feelings, but when pushed hard enough, it can happen. A few days ago, I was pushed hard enough. I'll apologise right now if any of the editing gets a bit choppy for the next few minutes. I need to set the scene for how this neurotypical blip happened in the first place, but it's not going to be easy for me. These were painful events, or they wouldn't have had the effect they did, and they're still red raw. If I start getting too emotional, I'll edit it out. I need to set the scene for you so you can make sense of what happened to me and why it opened my neurotypical eyes for a couple of days. I'm Quinn, and I'm autistic, as I mentioned earlier. Unlike most autistic people my age, I've known I was autistic since I was a teenager. I was 13 when an educational psychologist, fresh from reading Lorna Wing's pioneering work on broadening our understanding of autism, told me that he thought my problems coping in school and with life in general were the kind of autism she described. It didn't make any practical difference back then, of course. It was several years before the autism spectrum would be added to the manuals, and there wasn't a single teacher who could do anything with the knowledge. If you think SEND provision is a bit crap now, you should have seen the 1980s. I went from being an academic high flyer at age 11 to leaving school at 16 to get on the hamster wheel of full-time work, and I never stepped off to finish my education like I always hoped. My mum was autistic too, in a similar manner to me. And it's thanks to her that I grew up with my sanity intact. She gave me a grounding in the world when it looked crazy to me. She didn't have all the answers, not to the kinds of questions I was asking, but she was asking the same questions as I was. We struggled to understand the same contradictions, yet also had many of the same insights. Above all, she taught me how to find answers, for which I'm forever in her debt. But one thing that bugged me about my childhood, something that felt so unfair at the time, was that we never had pets growing up. All my friends had cats and dogs at home and would often have small pets of their own, hamsters, gerbils and the like, but we had a strict no pets policy. My dad would have got a dog in the blink of an eye, but my mum wouldn't have it. It's all well and good when they're running around being cute, she'd tell us, but it's not the same when something happens to them. I'm not putting my kids through that. They'll get enough of that when they get older. My mum would be well into her 90s if she was still with us. Lived through the whole of World War II as a child in the midst of a military city raised by the Blitz. She grew up losing people, either overnight or via telegram, and so she was very sensitive to grief and its consequences. She was trying to shield us from suffering some of what she went through as a child. 20 years ago, I met Alex, my wife, Mrs. A, as I usually call her on screen. When we met, we both had cats. She had two, actually, but when we moved in together and eventually married, only my Phoebe came with us. She was quite old by then, but she'd been by my side through a lot. She was actually my first wife's cat originally. When we met, she had a cat and a dog. When she left me, she left the pets behind. I don't know if my spinal arthritis that made it impossible for me to walk our dog played a part in her choice to leave me, or even gave her pause for thought when she decided to leave the dog behind. But thankfully I was able to get the dog rehomed and Phoebe stayed with me. Over the following years, she moved with me from Devon to Bristol to Wales, back to Devon to Bristol again, and eventually to here, where she saw out her last couple of years with Alex and I. I loved Phoebe so much, and we went through a lot together, but I was never her human. That was my first wife. Phoebe used to follow her around everywhere and would sleep on her feet every night, but she never got that close to anyone after she left. We were close, very close, but if you've had pets, you know what I mean. Phoebe chose my first wife as her human, and however much we went through together, I could never fill that role. When Alex and I went to the shelter a few months after she passed away and chose Jimmy, the first pet I ever got to choose the name of, things went kind of the same way in the end. My wife had already had to step back to part-time work thanks to her deteriorating health, and shortly before Jimmy joined our family, she'd stopped work altogether. That was 15 or 16 years ago. I was still going out to work full-time whilst she stayed at home with Jimmy, and inevitably he bonded with her in much the same way as Phoebe had with my first wife. Jimmy and I were great friends and had our own things going, especially when Alex was too ill to get up and he only had me for company. But when push came to shove, he was Alex's cat. If we both called him, he'd go to her. It was heartbreaking for both of us when he suddenly got ill a couple of years ago and there was nothing we could do for him. We had to put him to sleep. It was a rough time for us, grief-wise, because we lost a lot of people and other things in a very short time. And there's no doubt I've had trouble coping with all that grief ever since. My dad had passed away only a couple of months before, after a very traumatic couple of years. And between that and losing Jimmy, I got made redundant from a 30-odd year career in an industry that no longer required my skill set. Since then, trying to build up this channel and my autism work has been the only viable way of me making a living, and I'm not doing great at that either. Between then and now, my mum passed away too, after several years of dementia. Later that year, my wife's father died suddenly whilst recovering from a minor operation, and she took it really badly. It only added to her woes though. Her health is now the lowest it's ever been. She can't even get up many days and needs me for everything. And when she can get up, she needs my help with most tasks. But through those last couple of years of strife and loss, one little thing has been my ray of light throughout. My cat, Orla. When we went to the animal shelter after Jimmy died, we adopted 2 little kittens from the same litter, sisters. Orla, a scrappy little ginger, and a tiny, shy sister, Neota, who Orla had protected from their rowsy brothers. The shelter particularly wanted them to stay together, and we were happy to oblige. I can't say any more about Orla without crying. I won't be able to put any photos up either. I might do that another day. All that matters here is that she made me her human. The first animal that ever chose me that way. No pet ever loved me like that before. She was like that childhood dog, that first pet my friends had fond memories of, but I didn't get to experience that until I was in my 50s, on the unemployment scrap heap and the disabled carer of an even more disabled wife. On Monday of this week, I had to take Orla to the vets because she suddenly became unwell, and I didn't bring her home, just like happened to Jimmy. This video isn't about grief though, because there's a lot of it. I know some people might attempt to trivialise it, even laugh at me for being so cut up over a cat, but I've no time for folks like that. My grief is real, whether you appreciate it or not, and in my world you respect that and show people some kindness. But it isn't what felt so alien to me, so scary almost. I've felt grief before, and that's what this is, pure and simple. It's different to the grief I felt for Mum and Dad and for my father-in-law, but it's also different to Phoebe and Jimmy, and yet all that is easy to explain. I had a very special relationship with this particular cat, and she was taken from us suddenly and so young. What scared me is what went through my head when the vet told me the score. I had a bad reaction in the vets. I thought Orla probably had a stomach bug or a parasite that the worming treatment couldn't shift. But straight away, he told me it could be more serious and she'd need a scan to confirm the diagnosis. Now, Alex was at home in bed, too unwell to come with me to the vets, so I had to call her and tell her what was happening. She was understandably upset, and something clicked in me at that point. I started going into shock. My knees started to go from under me. I had to brace myself, and I broke out in a profuse sweat. Nausea rising, room started swirling. I thought I was going to faint. I told the vet when he came back in to go ahead and do the scan, and I tried to head to my car to get home whilst the scan was being done, but I never made it. I collapsed on the ground next to my car in a heap, shivering and struggling to breathe. The receptionist from the vets had watched me as I headed to my car, obviously a little concerned, and she was at my side in moments. Long story short, I had gone into a profound state of shock. I'm familiar with alexithymia and autistic shutdowns, but this was different. Physical, visceral, painful inside and out. I felt faint, yes, but once I hit the ground, all was clear again. I was freezing cold, shivering, sobbing, but conscious and fully with it. But I was also deathly pale and lying in the middle of the vet's car park. So they called an ambulance. The paramedics got me into the ambulance and ran loads of tests, and luckily everything checked out and they were able to release me without taking me to hospital. I hadn't had a heart attack or anything, just suffered a huge bout of physiological shock brought on by emotional trauma. That's only happened twice in my life before this week, that I remember at least. And the last time was over 30 years ago. It was a big deal event for me, very big. Scared the life out of me, to be honest. I started worrying, what if it is my heart? Where will that leave Alex on her own without me? And what about her mum? I'm the only one left after looking her and her Parkinson's now too. Where would she be if I checked out? I know that this has been a long story and a lot of background to get to this point, but it's vital you have the context for this. This was far from the kind of stress we deal with on a daily basis. It pushed me way beyond the boundaries of emotion, of attachment, of responsibility and of loss, all at once, even reaching past my autistic defences to literally shut me down. Because that's what normally happens to me when stress mounts up like that. I shut down in the autistic sense, not the physiological one. When emotional stimulus gets too high for me, my feelings slip to one side and calm logic takes over. When logic fails, then I go into autistic shutdown. Speech goes, my attention draws in, and I start involuntarily stimming. Not always that, but that's very common. But none of that happened. The trauma of that moment was too much, even for my divergent neurology to protect me. And I went into shock like anyone else would. And in that moment, I got that glimpse of the world neurotypical folks keep trying to tell me about. The grief and the shock aren't the point of this story. They're only the set dressing to the true revelation for me. For in my pain and anguish, my fear at losing Orla, actually, for a moment, thought of doing something really selfish. And I didn't like it. Still don't like it. I could have brought Orla home for a little while. They could have filled her up with pain meds and other drugs and sent her home for a few days, maybe a few weeks. But we'd still lose her. Might even not last the night. That was a possibility. I actually thought about doing it. For a brief, selfish moment, I tried to convince myself it would be okay, that the pain meds would be enough and she'd be okay for a little while, so I wouldn't have to lose her yet. I felt selfish. I've never felt that way before in my life, ever, and I didn't like it. I've never once in my life put my needs or wants before anyone else's, and for it to happen like that doesn't make me feel good about myself. If I tell people how I felt in that moment, it's okay, they say. It's understandable. You were unhappy, desperately so. You had to make one of the hardest decisions you ever had to make. So it's no wonder you wavered for a moment. But that's missing what's so uncomfortable, so scary for me. For just a brief moment, my emotions were in control of me, not the other way around. My rationality, my balanced view was struggling to be heard over my irrational, fear-driven desire not to lose Orla. And I contemplated choosing one more night with her over doing the right thing, the decent thing. Ever since I got my autism diagnosis in my teens, I've had a name for what makes me different. And I've spent more time trying to work out exactly what that means than on anything else in my life. Like most autistic folks, I've never quite understood the neurotypical decision-making process because it's so unlike ours. I've always known that in non-autistic minds, emotions can sometimes carry a lot more weight than facts and figures or other points of view. It's the only explanation for the way the world works around us. Regular folks make more emotional decisions than they think they do, even those who pride themselves on their objectivity. A little bit of selfishness is seen as healthy. Just keep it in check. Bit of selfishness here, spot of altruism there, and we're all balanced out, aren't we? But as an autist, I find it impossible to be selfish. I don't even think of selfish options most of the time. I think in terms of goals and objectives, facts and processes rather than feelings or status. If I see that an outcome benefits me slightly more than someone else, I'll put in the work to find a better balance. I'd rather lose out a little than win a little and still have a clear conscience. Thanks very much. It's a crappy way to lead your life in this world, though. This world is highly competitive. There are predators and criminals out there for us to be wary of, and a little bit of selfishness goes a long way to guarding against that. But my brain doesn't work that way. I never think of the selfish option because I'm not motivated in that direction. Until the other day, when my fear at losing Orla pushed my little autistic brain past its normal protections, beyond the capacity of my neurodivergent wiring to contain it, and I felt selfish feelings. This isn't about morality. It's not about right or wrong. Nobody would have tried to shame me for wanting to spend a little longer with her. Not one of you. It would have been entirely understandable, justifiable and human to do so. I've never in my life felt the temptation to be selfish before, and I didn't like it. I didn't like that my path wasn't clear, that my feelings guided me towards a choice that put my needs first and hang the consequences. I didn't make that choice, but I came close. Every day of my 55 years on this earth, my emotions have always played second fiddle to my rationality. If they get too much, they disappear for a while, even when I don't want them to. And the rest of the time, they're not in charge. I'm not an impulsive person. That's who I am. In autistic terms, I'm pretty average in that respect. But in everyday people terms, it makes me a bit weird, a bit unpredictable. I get why people find autistic people a bit strange when they first meet us. We take quite a bit of getting used to. I know, and I don't resent that, because it goes both ways. If you think I'm a bit weird, then you can bet your bottom dollar I think you're just as weird too, because we have different frames of reference. None of this is to suggest that neurotypical people are all selfish or thoughtless all the time. Not a bit of it. I know plenty of kind, decent and thoughtful people who wouldn't get near any kind of neurodivergent diagnosis. But a lot of autistic people can't feel selfish urges, or we don't think of them until too late. I get that the average person on the street might not fancy living in the world us autists live in. It's fine. It's understandable. We do struggle with some things in life we really think should be easier, so I can't blame anyone for not wanting to deal with that. You might miss the emotional colour in your decision-making, might even struggle to cope without it if it wasn't there to help guide you to where you need to go. But it's not for me. When I strip away all the shock and the grief of the last week, and all the background trouble and strife that brought me so low before that too, and just leave that one thing behind, I'd still feel uncomfortable. Because of my neurodivergent wiring, I've never had to fight against my emotional needs before. Never had a crisis of conscience and been tempted to do just what felt nice until now. So whilst I see why someone who isn't autistic might look at the world I describe, the autistic world I live in every day, and think to themselves, rather him than me, can you see why I might look the other way and think the same thing? It takes me a long time to make decisions sometimes, way too long sometimes. I know that, but I can't do it the other way, not without needing an ambulance, it seems, anyway. So you do your way, and I'll do mine. And you never know. If we stop worrying about whose way is better or more normal and just put our heads together, then perhaps, as a diverse team with different strengths, we could do a better job than any of us could do alone. I'm Quinn, and I'm autistic. Thank you for watching.